or I was ready or able to change. And that's the real trick for the alcoholic, because we usually overshoot the mark when we wind up in the cemetery. Okay, and let me say one other thing. I know about cocaine, I know about marijuana, I know about speed amphetamines, but I'm an alcoholic first, last, and always. I don't take a drink one day at a time. Okay, all that other stuff is just falling by the wayside. Should I pick up a drink, it will be followed by another and another, and I'll be chasing all that stuff that I used to do. Should I give up this precious gift of sobriety? Okay, my last drinks were on September the 2nd of 1990. They were in this place where I'd been a bartender, a bar manager. It was Rogers Tap Room. It was bikers and pool tables and people from all walks of life. And I worked there off and on for about 8 years. I was the big shot, tough guy. I thought I was the man. But on September the 2nd of 1990, I had a broken rib. My glasses were broken. The police were looking for me. And I knocked back 8, 7, and 7s in 7.5 minutes. And I could no longer get drunk, okay? That is the worst place in the world for the alcoholic to be when the heat's coming down and the booze quits working. What was I going to do now? Well, I wound up in AA. My father had given me an AA director a week and a half before and said, son, I think you may be a problem drinker, and someday you might want to use this. And there I was in Brown's Motel, and I said the first honest prayer of my life after it was, God, kill me or cure me. I can't stand it anymore. The people I've hurt and the things that I've done, what do I have to do? And the thought came to me, Duke, you better give that AA a try. And I picked out a meeting to go to that night, and I knew if I could get to that meeting that things were going to be okay. And they were. I stand before you almost 11 years later. I'm sober. And that's by the grace of God. That's by the program of recovery, which is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I only know of 2 experts on alcoholism and on recovery from alcoholism. Those experts are the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12, our 12 steps and 12 traditions. Those are the only 2 experts I know. When I sponsor people, I try to sponsor from my experience and from the literature. When I start sponsoring from opinion or what you should do or what you ought to do, then I may be off base and I might get somebody killed like that. So I try to be real careful about my sponsorship. Sponsor people in different ways. Well, let me tell you how I got my first sponsor. I was tending bar in 1982, and I met this fellow. His name was Chip. Chip had a year's sobriety, and his sponsor had told him that if he ever decided to go back out to drinking, to please come and tell him. And Chip, being a good man of his word, he went and saw Bill B. and told him that AA just wasn't for him, and he was going back out. And that was when I met Chip. He was back out there drinking when I met him. And I was with him in 1985 when he got, we were out drinking together. He dropped me off back in Pikesville. And anyway, he went out and got his 5th DWI. And I heard he was going to AA again. So anyway, I wasn't too concerned about him going to AA because I was still drinking and stuff. But my first month of sobriety, I wound up living in a parking lot over in Rockville. And that was just where my drinking had taken me because I had nowhere else to go. And that's about as close to homeless as I want to get. But I wasn't going to go to this meeting that I'd gone to the week before. I was going to try to find this place, the Alano Club, and I didn't know where it was. But instead, I went to this group that I'd gone to the week before, Monday Night Serenity. And a lady made an announcement for the good of the group and the good of AA as a whole. When I got there weren't many seats left, and I wound up sitting right next to this woman. And the announcement that she made was that Chip T was in the Howard County Hospital. He'd had a heart attack. And if he was okay and he'd be back in AA. And when she said Chip T, I knew I knew the guy, and boy, what a coincidence. I heard in AA, one of the first things I learned was that coincidences were God's way of being anonymous. And that's how I found my first sponsor. That's how I wound up working the steps. We talk about sober by the grace of God. I'm sober by the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sober through the program of recovery, which is the 12 steps. It's not just the grace of God. If it was just the grace of God, then all alcoholics would be sober, and we are not. Okay, I've heard the grace of God defined as the unconditional and unmerited love of God for man. Okay, so if it was just the grace of God, then all alcoholics would be sober. We're just not. It doesn't work that way. The fellowship is wonderful, but the wonder will wear off. Okay, We talked about meeting makers make it. Well, I can go to 999 meetings, but until I do a 4-step, that's made a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself, I don't really get a look at myself, okay? Program of recovery, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says in here in the foreword, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life can expel the obsession to drink, enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole, okay? That's the program of recovery. When I sponsor people now, what we do is as we're working the steps, I ask them to find a spiritual principle in each step that they find in that step and to put that in the chapter on that step in this 12 and 12. I was here. I had a vital spiritual experience, which I don't have time to go into right now, but I can tell you this. The doctor's opinion in our big book says that the natural state of the alcoholic is restless and irritable and discontent. See, alcohol is the anesthesia for life. And now that I put the drink down, I've got to find a different way to live. That's where the steps come in. I was here 14 months. I had not done a 4-step. Chip put me on a deadline. I had until such and such a time. He didn't say what was going to happen if I didn't do it, but I figured he was going to fire me. But I also knew something that says here in the big book on the 5th step, it says, for us to skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Okay, and I know what vital means. You know, when you go to the hospital, they take your vital signs, they take your pulse, your temperature, your blood pressure. Vita from the Latin is life. So this thing is a matter of life and death for me, okay? I did that 4-step. It was 30 pages long. He had me do it out of this book, this 12 and 12. And then I shared it with him, okay? What I'd like to get to now is sponsorship. If you look at the symbol of Alcoholics Anonymous, okay, when I took that 4-step to my sponsor, what he had me do, it says admitted to God. So I had to take those 30 pages, and I had to kneel, and I had to read them to God. I had to admit them to myself. I had to go to the mirror, and I had to read those 30 pages to me, and they were pretty ugly, okay? And then I had to admit to another human being, and that was my sponsor. I shared things with that man that I could not tell a priest in confession. As a matter of fact, I was thrown out of confession once, and that's another story. But, you know, if I look at the circle and the triangle, the symbol of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's a sponsor, that's the sponsee, that's a sponsor, and that's God. That's the way I look at it. That's the linkage. Although God doesn't appear much in burning bushes anymore. He works through people. Okay, and what happened in that experience of sharing that 5th step with Chip was he started to share things with me about him. I was getting out my deep, dark secrets, okay, and it was pretty ugly. And then he started sharing of himself with me, okay? And his secrets were a lot darker than mine, let me tell you. Okay, and through that experience, something spiritual happened. Instead of being a bad person trying to get good, I became a sick person trying to get better, okay? God doesn't care as much about my ability as my availability. I don't have the power to get anybody drunk, to get anybody sober. Back to sponsorship, I brought these pamphlets here that I will leave with Jay. And there's pamphlets around Alcoholics Anonymous for all different kinds of things. But if you want to know about sponsorship, here it is, questions and answers on sponsorship, okay? It's in the literature. That's where our recovery is. This is conference-approved literature, but in here it has things like, what is sponsorship? How does sponsorship help the newcomer? How should a sponsor be chosen? For the person wanting to be a sponsor, is there any best one way of sponsoring a newcomer? Can a sponsor be too firm? Should a sponsor lend money to a newcomer? That's a good one. As I said, I've also had the privilege of sponsoring several men in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll share some of those experiences with you now. Let me tell you about Rob, okay? Rob came into my life. I went to traffic court, and the cop didn't show up, so I had some extra money, and I went back to this place where I used to work just for lunch. And he's sitting next to me, and he notices my earring, which is a circle and triangle. He's drinking draft beer, and he says, so you go to that A&A? I said, yeah. He says, well, how do you stop drinking? I said, you stop by putting down that beer. Okay, and he was in my life for a time, and there were many times when he'd call me up, and he'd be having problems, and let's go to a meeting. And we'd set up a place to meet, a parking lot, and he wouldn't show up. And this would happen time and time and time again. And people in AA thought I was foolish. If I would talk to him about that, the guy stiffed me again. But you know what? The whole time that I waited for him in a parking lot, I never took a drink, okay? Rob showed up at my home group November 3.5 years ago, and he was willing. You know, I don't pray for people to have willingness necessarily. I pray for them to hit bottom, to have desperation, because the desperation will bring you to the willingness. Because he knew that I would be at my home group that night. I don't miss my home group unless it's a very serious matter, okay? We got back into the swing of things, okay? And he's worked the steps, and now he's 3.5 years sober, okay? God working through people. There was another fellow about the same time that I met Rob. His name was Larry Bingham, okay? And I had known Larry when I was a bartender. He was at the rehab, and he showed up at my Monday night home group, and he asked me to be his sponsor, so we tried to get started with things. And we worked the first 3 steps together. Now it was time to do the 4th step. And what it says in the literature, it says that some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. Remember Duke balking at the 4th step? The sponsor put him on a deadline. Well, Larry went back to his psychiatrist and to his caseworker at the treatment center because he really didn't want to do the 4th step. And they said, well, Larry, that's okay if you don't want to do that. You can go back and do your 1st step over again. And when Larry came to me and reported that, I asked him, I said, Larry, where is your psychiatrist home group? He said, what? I said, where is your psychiatrist home group? Because, you see, I don't care if he went to Harvard Medical School. When it comes to our disease, I don't know if he knows what he's talking about when it comes to alcoholism or recovery. Okay, and I'm not insulting the doctor there. I'm telling you like it is. Larry Bingham died on June the 22nd of 1995. I was in San Diego at the International Conference of AA. He was 31 years old, and the death certificate said acute alcohol poisoning, 31 years of age. Okay, when you see somebody die from this thing, you get a whole different perspective on it, okay? Let me tell you about my buddy Bucks. He's a good old boy from Carroll County. He's in his late 60s now, and Buck went to jail for a long time. There was an altercation one night in the bar. 3 people went out, and they skipped out on a tab, and I went out after them, and Buck followed me out the back door to help me out, okay? Later on, a couple weeks later, Buck got in some real trouble, and he wound up going to prison. I'd heard about that, but I didn't really care because I was still drinking and drugging. But anyway, now I'm sober in AA for a few months, and the guy says that somebody forgot about the institution commitment. They dropped out, and they were going down to BPRU on Greenmount Avenue. That's a Baltimore Pre-Release Unit. Would I fill in and go? I said, sure I would. So I went down there that night, and the last person to come into the AA meeting was my old buddy Buck from the bar, okay? Now, my father told me the greatest definition that he ever learned of love, he learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was doing something for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Okay, the root of my disease is selfishness and self-centeredness. I have no perception of unconditional love, okay? I'm selfish and self-centered by nature. Because Buck had been there for me that night in the bar, I went back to see him at BPRU every week for 6 months until he was released. And I'd take him a thing of coffee or a thing of tobacco. He rolled cigarettes in prison. That's how he made money. Or I'd take him a big book or an AA cassette tape, okay? And through that experience, I came to understand that unconditional love. And then Buck asked me one day, he said, Duke, he says, can you get me another one of those 24-hour-a-day books? And I said, sure, Buck, can I ask you why? He says, well, my friend Pat, he's been in for 17 years now, and if he can't get out of the cell, then he can't come over. We share this book every day, and that way he'll have one of his own. See, a retired merchant seaman by the name of Lenny Nottingham, who I never met, took my father to his first meeting with Alcoholics Anonymous. My father tried to pass this thing on to me. I tried to pass it on to Buck, and Buck's passing it on in prison, okay? That's one hand reaching out, helping another hand over the years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, and I'll just close with this. These are the words of Dr. Bob Smith, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was dying from cancer, and he went up to the stage in a wheelchair. And what he said was this: my good friends in AA and of AA, I get a big thrill out of looking out over a vast sea of faces like this with a feeling that possibly some small thing I did a number of years ago played an infinitely small part in making this meeting possible. I also get quite a thrill when I think that we all had the same problem. We all did the same things. We all get the same results in proportion to our zeal, and enthusiasm and stick-to-itiveness. If you will pardon the injection of a personal note at this time, let me say I have been in bed for the last 7 months, and my strength hasn't returned as I would like, so my remarks of necessity will be very brief. There are 2 or 3 things that flashed into my mind which would not be fitting to lay a little emphasis. One is the simplicity of our program. Let's not louse it up with all Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind, but have very little to do with our actual work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. We understand what love is, we understand what service is, so let's bear those 2 things in mind. Let us also remember to guard and remember the tongue, and if we must use it, let us use it with kindness and consideration and tolerance. One more thing. None of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or 2, to do numerous little kind of thoughtful acts on our behalf. Let us never get to such a degree of smug complacency that we are not willing to extend or attempt to extend to our less fortunate brothers that help which has been so beneficial to us. Thank you very much. And he was dead a few weeks later. Thank you. We have 5 minutes for questions and answers on sponsorship. For your question, though, if you would please come to the podium, Betsy and I will try to answer them. That's they want this on part of the tape. So if you have any questions on sponsorship, fire away, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Main question is just, I'm Dave, I'm outbound. Everybody, I just want to know when you think you're ready to sponsor others. Is it advice of your own sponsor, or is it something just click?
What they told me when I had those 3 months was that I had 3 more months in that girl bed, and that I could help her. And if I had something I could give away, the big book says I can't transmit something I haven't got, so I couldn't have transmitted how to work the first 9 steps to that girl. But I could transmit how to show up at a meeting sober. She did stay sober for about 6 months, and I went with her a bunch during that period of time. So that's my
People choose sponsors for all different kinds of reasons, and it is best if someone asks you, and you've never, especially if you've never done it before, to talk to your sponsor about it, because he might tell you to go check out this pamphlet, Questions and Answers on Sponsorship, because that'll help you out in it. I believe that it's God working in my life when somebody asks me to sponsor him, and that's that connection of the circle and the triangle again. And God doesn't care as much about my ability as my availability. I hope you answered.
I'm a sponsor, right? Well, I don't believe in, like, step 2, right? Say, can't believe the power of greater in ourselves, God restores society. You know, my idea of God is like supreme intelligence. You know, so how can I tell somebody, you know, fake it till you make it when I don't believe myself? You know, because I say I want to help somebody, but I don't want to lie to them either. I believe that God lives in me, it's in yourself. You know, so I'm like, how can I tell them to believe in something that I don't even believe in?
One of the most cherished tenets of Alcoholics Anonymous is to find a higher power that works for you. It does not have to be the Christian God. They recommend the group as a higher power because the group, you know, there's 30 people in here. That's greater than 1, okay? They're all sober. So that's a power greater than myself because 2, 3, 4 is greater than 1. A higher power can be something with a capital S, okay? Something's keeping you sober. The spiritual principle I found in the 2nd step was hope, that maybe this deal can work for me. You know, there was a negative power of alcohol in my life. Now, if there could be a negative power, why can there not be a positive power? And it talks about restoring me to sanity. I spent a half a day one time with a court-appointed psychiatrist because they wanted to see if I was fit to have visitation with my daughters. But what it really means in there is it talks about the subtle insanity that precedes the first drink. I no longer get that convenient amnesia. I'm no longer willing to pay the price of what I know it's going to cost me if I pick up that first drink. I think that's the heart of the 2nd step. And you don't have to believe in JC as your higher power, believe in God. There are atheist groups in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't go along with that, but that's okay because AA tells you to find a higher power that works for you.
When your willpower had that noodle, I mean, does encouragement or is just the benevolence to others strengthen your willpower or whatever necessity that you feel as though is essential for your development as all of their mind.
JQ was talking about willpower, and I think some days, we don't. I have good days and I have bad days. Okay, sobriety, if nothing else, is how I deal with life on a daily basis. They said in the readings that lack of power, that was my dilemma. See, alcohol gave me a power. Okay, it made me feel good. It made me look at the world in a different way. But in the end, alcohol works just fine in the life of the alcoholic until it kills him. Okay, if lack of power is my dilemma, there's another reading that says, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Okay, so that's part of sponsorship is to help someone find a power that works for them. I've sponsored Jewish people. People from all walks of life come to AA. My father's home group was the Shalom group. It's still in existence. It was the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous ever founded in a Jewish synagogue. Okay, so it's really the trick. Alcoholism is the disease of holes. Okay, I'm like a piece of Swiss cheese inside, and I used alcohol, people, sex, drugs to try and fill up those holes in me. In the end, those holes are unfillable. The only thing that fills up my holes is God, AA, and the steps. So I hope that answered your question.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm an alcoholic. And so we're going to, actually, Susie and I are going to go through the 12 steps is what this session is about. Is that better to do that? Do you think? All right. Okay. Well, we're just going to start right into it. I'm going to introduce you to Susie.
I'm a grateful alcoholic, and my name is Susie. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Oh, okay. I really got a lot out of the speakers earlier, and especially the third speaker I wanted to thank because he told my story. I was one of those alcoholics that wandered into AA because there actually wasn't anywhere else for me to go. I was empty-eyed, brokenhearted, and alone. And I'm going to start with step one. And I just wanted to say that I'm really grateful that I can be here today, but also that the fact that there were steps for me to follow, because I have never done anything in my whole life from the beginning to the end. I started a whole lot of things in my life, but never beginning to the end. And this was the first time that I actually did it with somebody, and I did it to the end, and it really benefited. Number one, or step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. My sponsor told me for a month to read step one out of the 12 and 12 every day, and she told me, and find the word in there that you think is most powerful. And I was like, it's either unmanageable or powerless. Got to be one of those two. And I knew I had it both. And my life really was at that point because I would go to work every day, come home, go up, lock myself in my bedroom, ignore my children, ignore my responsibilities, try not to get drunk or high, would end up getting drunk or high, making it through the night, sort of, getting up again and doing it every single day. So when I finally met back with her, I told her, it's a toss-up. I can't decide whether it's powerlessness or unmanageability. And she said, no, it's we. Because I wanted you to really think about what you've been doing. And it was all about the fact that I was going to solve this and I would have a cure by either not using this today or mixing those together and tomorrow I wasn't going to do it and I was really starting over again and I never could do it. And so this was the beginning for me to understand that there is no way that I can do it alone. That we has to be the most important word in that step for me. And that brings me to 2.
All right, step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, what's the definition of insanity? They told me that was doing the same thing over, expecting different results. I understand that. I understand saying that I'm only going to have so many drinks, or I'm only going to drink hard liquor, or I'm going to drink just beer. I'm just going to drink just the drugs and not drinking, just drink and not the drugs. And I tried all of that, right? All those different combinations. It always led me back to the state of drunkenness I didn't want to be in and doing things I didn't want to do every time I picked up a drink. So that helped me to understand that I needed help, because of my own, I end up going back doing the things I don't want to do and becoming the person I don't want to become. So I need to find a power greater than myself. Now, I didn't believe or have any idea that any higher power was going to do anything for me, but I believed in you guys. I believed in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did see that you guys had something that I wanted, and something in your eyes, something in your story that told me that what you had experienced and you recovered from all those experiences of drinking in your life. Now, so I used the groups of Alcoholics Anonymous as my higher power. Now, my sponsor gave me an assignment. And my assignment was to go out and talk to people about this step. And as I'm talking to people about this step, I'd come back and have to report to him what I had found out about it and discovered. Well, this is a strange thing happened. Step 2 ended up being 2 things: a foundation for today's recovery, and it rounded out my first step. Okay, my first step came full circle, because if I'm coming to you and I'm asking you questions about this step, and then I'm telling you a little bit about what's going on in my life, and you tell me a little bit about what's going on in your life, we start creating a little bond, don't we? Guess what happened? For the first time, I got a little bit of we in my life, don't I? The second step rounded out my first step, because the we, which is the most important piece of me getting this, I believe, is my opinion, I need to have that we in my life. Now, what happened? If I'm asking you about what's going on in your life, and you're telling you what's going on in my life, and you say, you know what, I've experienced that. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is the good results and the bad results that I got from doing that. And I can say to myself, I never thought of that. I would have done it this way. My experience shows that of my own thinking, I go forward with life situations and I create havoc along the way. But if I ask you about what you did and you say, well, I did this and this worked and I did this and this didn't work, guess what? Your experience is a power greater than me, isn't it? Because I haven't experienced that before. So I'm getting some direction, aren't I? And if I'm getting direction from you, right, for the first time I'm trusting in something other than me, aren't I? That's a big key here. I'm beginning to change a little bit, aren't I? Instead of going through this life alone, right? And if I'm going to get a little bit of, hey, this worked if you do it this way, and so I go about handling life differently than if I would have done it on my own, and I get better results from doing that, guess what? Life doesn't have that train wreck that I'm leaving behind me anymore. And that's the definition of sanity in the second step. The definition of sanity is soundness of mind. I had no peace of mind living life on my own. But if I get help from you, I gain some direction, I get to the other side of my problems, and I feel better about how I conducted myself through it. I have peace of mind, soundness of mind. I'm beginning to gain some sanity. And then I go on to...
Which says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So step 1 is I can. Step 2 is he can. And step 3 is, so why not let him? Step 3 was a very, very hard step for me to come to and understand. And what helped me the most was somebody shared some information early in my sobriety with me that was very powerful. And it was, Susie, there is a God and you're not it. And that was an astounding thought, that I wasn't God. Because I had always been raised to think that I should be solving everything. I could think of everything. And I even coerced people to go along with me when I knew it was the wrong thing and it would hurt them. But, I had to have the answer. I just took that on myself. It was an ego thing. What I found was I was pretty angry at God when I came in, so I didn't want one. But I could see other people benefiting from it. And I'd hear people say in the rooms, if you don't have a God, use mine. He'll love you too. And so I started to do that. And then after a while, I used the GOD, which is the group of drunks, because I believed that God spoke through them. Because I would hear things that would be gentle to my mind, and nobody in that room knew what I was thinking at that time, but for some reason, they'd share something that would just bring me peace. So I knew that at that point, there was a higher power. There was something bigger than me that was loving me, even though I was trying to resist it. Today, I'm happy that I can say that I do believe in a higher power, that I have one that loves me very, very much. And what I would say to you is if you don't have one, use mine, because he'll love you too. And that brought me to and there's a prayer that you can use in step 3, but I'm going to let you read it, if that's okay. And then he's going to go into step 4.
The step 3 prayer in the big book is, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And I say that prayer every day. It's a good prayer to start saying, and it worked for me. It helped me fake it till I made it. Now, step 4, the first 3 steps, we've embarked now on this power outside of ourselves that's going to help us live a different life, right? Now, the next steps, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some changing, aren't we? Remember they said, don't drink, change everything about yourself, right? Heard that, right? Well, the first step in that process is I got to start taking an inventory, right? I got to take a look at what I've got to work with here, right? I'm on 4th step now, and I'm about to clean house, and I'm going to prepare, and then I'm going to execute. Prepare, and then execute, and you'll see that in the next few steps. Now, my assignment for the 4th step, and this is a good way to do a first 4th step, would be go to the 12 and 12, and in the 12 and 12, you'll come across some questions. And in these questions, I want you to take and write these questions on a piece of paper. And get a notebook and write each question on top of every page, right? And then answer every question that has to it that pertains to you. Okay? And that's how I did the 4th step. Now, let me tell you something, folks. I had stuff in my drinking career that I was taking to the grave. Anybody here understand that? Taking it to the grave, right? The steps are in order for a reason, because I needed to develop some kind of strength, some kind of power outside of myself that's going to help me get through these rough parts of this process of recovery. So when I got to those questions that asked me about those things that I was taking to the grave, and I knew this was the time I was supposed to write it down, my pen didn't work any longer. And I got a headache. I started to cry. So I called my sponsor. Because remember, my higher power at this point was still the group. I called my friend Frank K., who you guys saw yesterday, right? Good friend of mine. I called another alcoholic. And I needed that strength to get through it. And they said, you know what? Whatever it is that you're afraid of writing down here, is there a name for it? What you did? Yeah. Then you're not the first person who's done it. Oh, okay. I'm not so unique, am I? All right. So I wrote it down finally, but I had to have the help of those powers outside of me and other alcoholics to get me through that process. And all I'm doing is putting this stuff down. My sponsor said, hey, this is the last step. It's the only one there is. You just make that inventory. That's all you got to do. All you have to do at this step. And that's exactly what I did. He also told me to list down the 7 deadly sins, which is also in the literature. And I had to define them. Those are pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. So I had to write those all down and what my definition of those were. Okay? Because what it says here is that in the 12 and 12, These desires for sex relation, for material and emotional security, and for companionship are perfectly necessary and right, and surely God-given. These are natural things. My problem is, and it says here, whenever a human being becomes a battlefield for the instincts, there can be no peace. I took all those things to the extreme, and I created a battlefield of those things within my life and in my head, and I didn't have any peace. But now I'm coming to understand that, and I'm putting it down, and I've now prepared myself so that I can take that and execute in the next step.
And that's step 5.
Thank you.
Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This was a big step for me. I called my sponsor, told her I'd written it 30 different ways. She told me not to do that. Asked me to set a date. I told her the next month would be best. She told me this week. We did it. And I did let her know that I had practiced it. It'd take about 30 minutes. It took 3.5 hours. What happened at that moment was that we actually said a prayer, because this was the real first time that I actually was going to bring the higher power in, another human being. My God, they were really going to know what made Susie tick and why I didn't want to be alive. And say it out loud in front of myself, all at once. And that was the value of step 5, was really trusting that this process was going to work. Because there's a line in step 5 in the 12 of 12 that talks about me. I'm sure they knew me when they wrote it, which was that I was just suffered from extreme loneliness, that I couldn't let people in and let them know what was going on with me. In the end of step 5, it's my favorite paragraph, because it says, the feeling of being at one with God and man, this emerging from isolation through the open and honest sharing of our terrible burden of guilt, brings us to the resting place where we may prepare ourselves for the following steps toward a full and meaningful sobriety. And at that point, at the end of my step 5, my sponsor did spurn my step 4. And she said, now you got your driver's license to AA. And that brought me to step 6.
All right, step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. My sponsor said the same thing to me. My sponsor is not the same sponsor as Susie's sponsor, but also told me, now you have the driver's license in AA. What does that mean? That means now I can go forward and do some work with the inventory that we have gone over, right? Found out a little bit about you. Now let's start changing. Do you remember in the beginning when they told you, don't drink, change everything about you, right? That's how you got to recover. Well, how do I do that? I can't even do the not drinking part. What about changing everything about me? How am I supposed to do that? My sponsor said, trust this process. Now we're at the point where we're beginning the change steps in this program. Step 6 is preparing us, again, for change. Here's what my sponsor told me to do. I want you to go to, there was a club in Laurel, Maryland, and they have on the wall, they have all the character defects listed. I want you to write them all down. I want you to take those character defects, and I want you to list them on the top of a page and give yourself a few lines, and I want you to write down how each of those character defects pertains to you. Well, this is the list. My assignment was to write down pride, envy, anger, greed, self-centeredness, sloth, lying, procrastination, self-will, justification, cheating, ungratefulness, grandiosity, gluttony, deceit, jealousy, resentment, stubbornness, rebellion, fear, stealing, self-righteousness, revenge, impatience. Now, in the big book, this step is a paragraph long. I'm thinking this is going to be a breeze. No, this was not a breeze. In fact, it tells me that this is the step that separates the men from the boys. The very first line in the 12 and 12, right? This was not easy because I'm really taking a fine-tuned look. I've already gotten an experience of taking an inventory, but now I'm kind of fine-tuning it. And I'm going to help with my sponsor's help, start identifying those things that I find objectionable to me, that I find objectionable, not anybody else. This makes no difference what you think of me. I'm not going to change no matter how much you think of me. I'm only going to change with what I think of me. And that's what the key here is, right? And then it tells me this step separates the men from the boys. Well, what is the difference between the men and the boys? It says it right here in the literature. You want to hide something from an alcoholic, my sponsor says, go put it in the big book of the 12 and 12. It says it right here. The boys and the men. So the difference between the boys and the men is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective and the perfect objective, which is God. The difference between being self-centered and being what my higher power intended for me to become, which is of maximum service to my God and to my fellow man. Okay? But I got to take a look at those areas of where I have been self-centered, right? And one of the keys to step 6 for me that I found to be very important was the phrase entirely ready. Was I willing to go to any lengths? I hear in the meetings every day, right? Every meeting I go to, it says, become willing to go to any lengths, right? Are you going to be entirely ready? So step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifelong job. This does not mean that we expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us, as the drive to drink was. A few of them may be, but with most of them we shall have to be content with patient improvement. And the key words, entirely ready, underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. Progress, not perfection. You hear about that? It tells me I am now embarked. I am entirely ready to begin this process of progress. While it may not hit perfection, I'm ready to try to take a look at all of this and become the person my higher power intended to become. And now I've prepared myself, right? You get to execute this in step 7.
One of the things that I noticed, people that I admired in AA that would share in meetings, they always talk about working at, being more humble. I want to be more humble. So I decided early on, a few weeks, that sounded good. Said, I want to sound like that. Even though I was told, if you like what somebody else has, find out how they got it. I was all about the outside, kind of looking like it worked. So I went to somebody and I said, hey, how do you get humility? And they just laughed at me and they said, Susie, you can't get humility. Humility finds you. And so far through steps 1 through 7, this has all been about just ego deflation, about understanding that it's not all about me, that I am not in charge, that I do have another purpose. And step 7 for me, which is humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, was the beginning for me to understand that I wasn't here on earth to get something out of it for me, but I was here to become a servant in some way for others. And that was really big because I really thought it was all about me. In the 12, there's actually a 7-step prayer that comes with the step. This is the second prayer of the steps. I'm sorry. And I do say this pretty much every day. I'm looking for my little card. Here it is. And it reads, My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And like I said, this was the beginning for me to understand that I'm here to help others. And I'm not always going to pick when that help is because I may not really be in the mood or I really may not want to. But for some reason, my higher power is really good at steering me where I need to go. And I really benefit from that because I can see people appreciate it. I know I appreciate it when people do things for me, but I don't have to ask. So this was the real beginning for me to understand my purpose. And that brought me to step 8.
All right, step 8. Now, so we've begun the change, right? We've taken an inventory, shared it with God, into it with our sponsor, taken a little deeper look at character defects, and we've started to change them with God's help. So we're changing who we are, right? So cleaning house inside is one part of it. Now I have to clean some house outside. I got to repair some of that damage and that wreckage I've done out there, right? Now I'm preparing to do that in step 8. Step 8 is, again, another preparation step, right? And what I'm going to do is make a list. Says step 8, make a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Okay? It's making a list. I derived that list from the list I already made. Step 4, right? So my sponsor had me go back to take from what from my 4th step that I had done, and I can put together that list in the 8th step. Okay? And the 8th step, the key there is that I'm just putting the list down, and I need the help of a sponsor to determine what's important on that list and what's not important on that list, because my ego still hasn't gotten to the point that I can decipher. Not that I know that I don't think my ego ever would be able to get to that point, perhaps, but I do need the help of someone else to go over that list, right? And the key with the 8th step, I believe, is to become willing. Just like in step 6, was I entirely ready, right? Am I still willing to go to any lengths? And am I going to become willing? I don't have to do anything. I just have to become willing that I am going to go ahead and embark on this new life that I made a decision to do back in step 3, right? So it's testing me about my, willing to go to any lengths here, isn't it? All along the way. And that's what I had to think about in this step. Now, I love some of the things in step 8. Because step 8, it says the first line in the 12 and 12, steps 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relations. A difficult thing for an alcoholic, especially one that is active, right? But the very last line in the 12 and 12 says, it is the beginning of the end of isolation from our fellows and from God. Folks, that's why I drank. I drank to feel better about who I was so that I could fit in, that I could feel smarter, that I could feel a part of the gang, right? I could talk to women easier, you know what I'm saying? I could be the man with the guys. I wanted to fit in. Then alcohol turned on me. It made me say things and do things that made you not want to be around me. And I started isolating, didn't I? Not by choice, but because alcohol turned me into the person that I didn't want to become, right? The promise of step 8 is that I am embarking on the beginning of the end of this isolation between my fellows and of God, which is what I wanted the whole time, wasn't it? To feel a part of. And it's telling me that I can have that, and I'm just beginning the process of doing that. And what really helps bring that full circle is to prepare it and then execute it, which is step 9.
I don't know if you've ever seen those television shows or like stunt shows, or sometimes MTV has these funny shows and they're like, do not try this in your own home. And that was kind of what happened to me when I went to do step 9. It was like, do not do this step without the help of a sponsor. Step 9 is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except to do so would injure or harm them or others. It was important that I went through this with my sponsor because she actually helped me uncover the motives of why I felt that I wanted to make an amends. An amends, what she explained, was not an apology. It was a statement of how you were changing your life and you were taking steps to do so. And that would directly relate to the person. So my ex-husband, I did a lot of character assassination. I played the victim role with him. So I wasn't going to go to him and say, I'm not going to serve your most hateful dinner on your birthday. Or, I talked to him about, there were a lot of things that went wrong with us, and this was my part. It wasn't so much the incidences or the occurrences between those people that were important. It was the recognition of what my part was overall that made the relationship painful and uncomfortable. And that was really hard for me because, I came in just wounded from the world. I mean, beat up. And here I'm going back to people now and telling them that what I did was major and admitting it. She also told me not to have any expectations when I did my amends, that I shouldn't expect people to be open-armed and hugging me and, oh, don't worry about it, Susie. Of course you couldn't help it. And that was valuable. I can tell you that my amends were extremely, I don't know what the word is. They were just uplifting. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. And I encourage every single one of you to experience Step 9. It really made a difference in my sobriety. And they talk about the promises after you complete Step 9 of them coming true. And they are, we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Will comprehend the word serenity and will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see that our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will slip away. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly. They'll always materialize if we work for them. And that brought me to Step 10.
All right, now we're at the point where we are in what's called the maintenance steps. Okay? A cleaned house. Now I'm going to go out in the world and I'm going to take this blueprint for living without drinking and living a new way of life, and I'm going to maintain that. And in Step 10, we're going to continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Couple of different inventory. First one is the big book talks about an inventory of your day, and at the end of the day, you take, here it is. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving towards all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, or what we could pack into the stream of life? Well, we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures we should have taken. So I'm taking a look at how I'm conducting myself through the day, aren't I? And how I can be better. I'm looking at progress again, aren't I? Now, the other inventory is a spot check inventory. Step 10 is just powerful step. And it's showing me how to stop. Stop. I used to just react to you, say things and do things just based on just reaction with what you're doing or what others are doing. Now I can stop and take a look at how I'm going to behave. And that's what it's telling me to do a little bit here. Okay? In fact, the spiritual axiom says that it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. It says stop. Take a look at what's going on with you. What helped me to get through that spiritual axiom was that it said to me, whenever I'm disturbed, no matter what the cause, the answer is within me. That's what it's really telling you, isn't it? That's powerful to know. So it's telling me, once again, that I don't have to go through life just reacting. I can take a step back and It says here that in the big book that love and tolerance is our code. I'm trying to embark on this new life, aren't I? Right? And one of the things I like about the 10-step also, many things, but with the limited time, I'm going to end it with this. And that is the 10-step has a promise. And the promise of the 10-step is, it says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor, and if tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. And it goes on from there. Just like the promises in step 9, step 10 tells me that if I'm doing the work, this obsession to drink will be lifted from me. And I can tell you all from my experience that has happened to me. Now we're at step 11.
Okay. Step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. This is your third prayer, and it's on page 99 in the 12 and 12. And it's sometimes people call it the St. Francis prayer. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred I may bring love, that where there is wrong I may bring spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord I may bring harmony, that where there is error I may bring truth, that where there is doubt I may bring faith, that where there is despair I may bring hope, that where there are shadows I may bring light, that where there is sadness I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by this self-forgetting that one finds, it is for forgiving that one is forgiven, and it is by dying that one awakens to the eternal life. Amen. And this final and third prayer is finally actually telling me how to go about and be that instrument for my higher power. I love that step the most, I guess because I came in on Halloween, and so for my first month of AA, there was a lot of 11-step talk. And I found that my prayer started out with just help me. And today I can go further and ask and let my higher power put me where I'm needed. The meditation part I've been working on, and I would suggest to people what's helped me so much, is that I ask people who do meditate how they do it, and in time I've found a way that works for me. Because it's very, very important for Susie to every day take time and empty that head of hers, to open up and really just become very, very, very still. And that I work at very, very hard. And I can tell you that sometimes it's only for 3 minutes a day, and sometimes I'm really lucky and it'll go up to like 10 minutes. But I would tell you that it's been really helpful just talking with other people on how they meditate and then trying to develop a way so I can every single day try to open up to what my job is. And that brings me to 12.
And finally, at step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.